Hello and welcome. This is Global Payfest 25 and we're in Germany. I'm Freddie Morehouse, Associate Director at JJ Recruitment, and I'm delighted to be joined by Julian Scherer, Head of Payroll at International University for the next hour to discuss Germany's complex payroll system. Payroll in Germany is famously structured, but beneath that precision lies a dense web of tax rules, social contributions, regional requirements, and ever-evolving legislation. Whether you're expanding your team in Berlin, Munich, or Hamburg, understanding German payroll is essential for compliance and employee satisfaction. And lucky for you, we're here to help you get your head around the nuances specific to Germany. Julian is a true expert in navigating Germany's payroll framework with a deep experience supporting both academic and corporate environments across the country. He is skilled in international payroll and employee insurances and is an expert on German and Dutch payroll tax, pension, and labour law questions, including cross-border work, all forms of absences and taxable and non-taxable benefits, and he's the perfect guest to follow Heinz's session on Dutch payroll, considering the recent news on the tax treaty between Germany and the Netherlands. So Julian, firstly, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love for you to start the hour by telling us a little bit about your background and how you became involved in the world of German payroll.
Thank you so much, Freddie. I'm really thrilled to be part of this exciting format and to represent Germany in this most payroll-y day there is. Well, like so many of us, I actually fell into the profession. I actually read literature at uni and started my career in higher education, but kind of felt stuck and wanted to change. Because I speak several languages, I found a job in HR for an international company with lots of different European branches. I found my way to payroll there, got formalized training in the Netherlands, and then branched out into European payroll myself and actually found a career in the field. 2 years ago, I started at IU International University to build up the payroll department, which felt like a full circle moment for me. I'm now responsible for the payroll of more than 4,000 employees in Germany, Austria, Switzerland, the UK, and Australia.
Wow. Thank you, Julian. We're really excited to have you on board. In today's session, we'll explore Germany's key payroll challenges, recent legal updates, a real-world case study, and wrap up with a live Q&A to answer your questions. First of all, let's dive into Julian's expert presentation on the German payroll landscape. Over to you, Julian.
Thank you. All right. So let's talk about German payroll, where there's a form to fill out for everything. It's Germany after all. So let's start by looking at what makes Germany's payroll system so unique and the specific obligations for employers operating here. So when we think about the German payroll landscape, like in so many countries, it is governed by a very complex web of tax law, social security law, and labor law. Germans love to be taxed at the source of their income, which in Germany actually includes statutory health insurance. Other countries do it quite differently. In Germany, it's all tax at source. So basically, the employer is responsible for all necessary official registrations and reports when it comes to that. So let's look at the core components of German payroll. So first of all, the income tax, or Lohnsteuer, as we call it, it's withheld monthly based on the individual employee tax class, of which we have 1 to 6, the Steuerklasse. And it is submitted to the famous German Finanzamt, the official tax office. Apart from that, we have the social security contributions, of which there are 4. They are mandatory deductions for health insurance, pension, unemployment insurance, and long-term care insurance. It's usually split evenly between the employer and the employee. Which, fun fact, actually, all of those different contributions, they make up to 252 different combinations of contributions for which you have to have a certain group key to identify the individual situation of the employee and report them to officials, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, it is quite a lot.
Indeed. Next to that, we also love collective bargaining agreements, or the famous German Tarifverträge. They actually apply in many, many industries, and they set standards for wages, working time, and benefits. They're usually negotiated by workers' councils, unions, and the employers. Another fun fact, when thinking about those famous Tarifverträge, there are actually more than 88 1,000 different bargaining agreements in effect in Germany in 2025. So you really have to look out whether one is applicable for your industry. Apart from that, as mentioned earlier, registration and reporting. It's really important for Germany because the employer actually has to do everything for the employee. They have to register the employees with all necessary government institutions during the first month of the employment. Think about the tax office, the healthcare providers, the National Employment Agency, the collective accident insurances, and what have you. It's a long, long list where you have to really get everyone informed that they are now employed with you and they're identified correctly. And this, apart from that, you also have to provide a variety of different income-related reports on a monthly basis to those institutions, but also on demand to the employees, because there are so many things that an employee could need. For example, when they leave, unemployment information so that the actual insurance can be calculated, if they need housing subsidy and whatnot. Believe me, it's Germany, there's a form for that, and the employer has to fill it out. So thinking about all of those things, all of those contributions and what you have to do, Germany really is a country where there is a net pay culture. Since everything is deducted from your gross pay, you really have to focus on the net salary, and the employees do as well. They really want to see what lands with them at the end of the month. And really, you have to be accurate because Germans will ask, I can tell you that. So thinking about this, let's talk about the everyday headaches of a payroll in Germany and how to deal with them. So the tax class system in Germany is quite unique. We have 6 different tax classes, and they're really dependent on the individual situations, so whether they're married, whether they have dependents, do they have a secondary employment and whatnot. A change in this status, for example, if you marry, if there's a childbirth for you and whatnot, they actually have to be done with the tax officials. So if an employee comes to you and says that, well, I married last month, I now have a different tax class, you can say, well, great, congratulations, that's fantastic. But we haven't received that information from the tax office yet. So actually, if you set up payroll, you have to have an interface with the tax officials, and they have to tell you that something changed. If the employee tells you, you could change this, but you can never be sure. So you have to wait until the officials give you the green light for the change.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the social security system. It's quite complex. As I said, we have 4 mandatory contributions, and they actually change every year. So you have to really, really know what's changing after the year end. What are the new margins that you have? What are the income thresholds with those contributions? Because once you reach a certain level of income, you don't have to pay more. It just stops there. You have to pay the same amount. At the same time, exactly this threshold is also where you as an employee can opt for private health insurance and then decide what is part of your package. And then the employer actually has to pay a contribution as well. There's a lot of forms you have to fill out. There's a lot of forms you have to present to the employer so that you actually can pay the correct contributions. And of course, there are thresholds for that as well. So once an employee starts, so the hiring process is quite vast in Germany because you have to register those employees with the relevant authorities. Think about the health insurance. You have to make sure, are they covered? Is it the correct one? We have more than almost 200 different public health insurers in Germany, so you have to really identify them. And then on a monthly basis, make sure that if something happens, you have a system running where you can inform them. This is called the famous DÖF, which is a very large German compound word, means Datenerfassung und Übermittlungsverordnung. Very, very huge, very German. And there, of course, are standardized notifications that have to be sent out, and again, works with an interface with all of the different providers that are there. So as I said earlier, there are actually 252 different combinations of those 4 mandatory social contributions that we have. And you really have to look at the employee, their personal situation, their employment. Is it like a short-term employment? Do they earn to a certain amount? What's happening, and you have to identify them correctly because it really makes a difference on their pay slip of how much contribution they have to pay, but also you as an employer have to pay. So it could happen that you take the wrong decision, and then at the year end, you actually realize, oh, this was incorrect, and then you have paid way too much of those contributions, and getting them back is always a hassle. So you really have to make sure that you know which one is correct for which employee.
that was going to be one of my questions. So
Yeah.
if somebody comes to you and says, in the month, I got married a month ago, and they didn't let their employer know, what then happens there? How do their tax change?
So usually the employee, when they get married, they have to go to their local tax office branch and
Mm-hmm.
tell them, well, we're married, and they have to decide what kind of tax class they want to
Okay.
choose. And once they've done that, the tax office, we have this Elster database in Germany where all of this information is updated, and then the tax office has the power to write. So we basically only have the power to read this database, and then they update this with the individual tax ID of every single natural person in Germany. And then it's being interfaced to the payroll software, and then you just get a notification, hey, something changed here for this employee. And it can also be backdated. So that's also possible that they then say, yes, okay, we're putting it in there. It takes 2 weeks to process, and it's being backdated in the next payroll.
Okay. Never knew that.
Yeah. All right, so let's continue and talk about holiday and sick pay compliance. That's also a huge thing for Germans because holiday, you have 20 days of vacation each year legally, which is based on a 5-day work week. But actually, most employers give you 25 to 30 days. So they give you 5 to 10 days on top. That's very common. It really depends on the industry where you're working or whether there's a collective bargaining agreement in place that actually says how many days of vacation you should get per year. When it gets interesting in Germany, that's with sick pay. So when you're out sick, up until 6 consecutive weeks, you still receive salary from your employer. You, as the employer, you of course have to, be in contact with the health insurance that this is going on, and only after those 6 consecutive weeks per illness, might I add, then the health insurance takes over and pays the employee.
Okay.
To get all of those things together, you actually have a sick certificate process in Germany where we as the employers have to actually recover an electronic sick certificate via an interface with the health insurance to validate the periods of sickness that the employees give us. So basically, when you have an HRIS system, the employee says, I'm sick for this time, and then we have to go into that interface and say, is this correct? Is this the correct amount? And just imagine there are so many employees who think, oh, I only have a 4-day work week, so I go Monday to Thursday. Friday I'm off anyway, so I'm not sick on Friday. But yes, you are sick on Friday, and this actually factors into those 6 consecutive weeks. So there's a lot of manual work, and it's a very complex situation Germany has put itself into with those 6 certificates to get everything running. And we then, as payrollers, we of course have to make sure that everything is being set up correctly, especially when time and attendance is not mandatory yet in all industries in Germany. There is going to be change with that. Most people in Europe know this, but it's not mandatory yet in all industries. So it makes it very difficult to validate those sick periods. And it actually makes it very common that you have under or overpayments when you come to those 6-week thresholds, because if it's now exactly in the cutoff period of a month that the 6 weeks are actually reached, then what do? Do you don't pay them and then have an extra cycle afterwards? Do you pay them and have to ask the money back? Or it's quite common at the moment. It's not the best situation, but the good thing is the Germans know this. They're used to it by now, so there is understanding for it, but it could be better. Another fun thing about German payroll is our lovely thresholds for income. We have something which is called a mini job and a meaty job. A mini job means that if you earn up to 556 euros a month, you're actually only subject to flat rate contributions, which are being paid by the employer. So if you do it correctly as an employee, you can get 556 euros gross as net every month. There are some ways to opt in and opt out, but that's actually a great deal. And when you earn, more than 556 euros up until 2,000 euros, you actually have a progressive social contribution rate, which makes it even more attractive for certain employers to be in this area of earnings every month for low income, for seasonal work, because there are so little social contributions. It's interesting for employees as for employers. But of course, there's one thing that makes every payroller's heart skip. It's one-time payments in Germany. It's actually quite a thing. So every time you have a one-time payment in Germany, it's actually taxed very, very difficultly. So you have to have a very difficult tax calculation and social contribution calculation for one-time payments. They have increased taxation, they add to the overall social contribution margins, and they're not very transparent towards employees. And I can tell you it's a really big pain for them. And it's the highest explanation cost I have in my department for employees not understanding why is there so much tax I have to pay for this one-time payment. And we always have to pay them, well, that's Germany for you. It's not something we did. It's just how it works.
It wasn't me. It wasn't me.
It wasn't me. I mean, it's not the answer I want to give them, but it's really
Yeah,
difficult to make them understand all of the
yeah.
calculations because it's so dependent of what they've already earned, what they might earn. So this can actually change throughout the year, and this is very, it's not ideal. But luckily, a lot of those industries and collective bargaining agreements, they have certain one-time payments which are fixed in a salary. For example, it's very common in Germany to have a 13th month, which we call Weihnachtsgeld or Christmas allowance that we pay. And this then is not subject to those one-time payment calculations and taxations, which is quite nice if you can, put this one up in
Yeah.
there into your contracts. So yeah, those are the biggest headaches we're actually facing in Germany. Let's look at some changes, recent ones and upcoming changes. I already said the employee registration is a big thing now, and actually this year something changed for Germany. In the past, depending on the industry, you either have to, register someone on the day they start, and you have to have a direct registration with all of the officials, or you had the first pay run to do it. Now we have this weird place in between where you still have the first day that you have to register someone, or you have to do it within 7 business days after they start, which is quite hard to make this work, to get all of the information from the employee, to get everything done into the officials within those 7 days. It's new for all of us, and let's see how this one works out. As already mentioned before, we have the electronic sick notes, and I think that most people I talk to in Germany, in German payroll, on a theoretical level, it's actually something really nice to have everything, working with interfaces. But in practice, it's actually very, very complex because of all of the things that could go wrong with this 6-week threshold and the payroll cutoffs. Because there is information, of course, it's on a day-to-day basis that someone can fall sick or not feel better. And then you have all of those weird in-betweens. Do we overpay them? Do we underpay them? What's the best for the employee and for the employer at this point? So that's actually very, very complex and a lot of manual work that this electronic sick notes have brought us in Germany. Another good thing, though, on the other side is that most now of those certificates and reports that I mentioned earlier are being standardized now. So especially when we're looking at maternity leave and parental leave, we now have a standardized system in which we can report all of the earnings of our employees so that the official institutions that calculate the amounts or the allowances employees should get during maternity leave and parental leave, which are not being paid by the employer, but actually by the health insurance or by official institutions in Germany, can calculate that directly. So in the past, this was, every employer could, come up with a form to submit this. And now we have the EEL system. Everything is standardized and works very, very nicely. Also, something that just recently is actually out of fashion is an inflation compensation, which was very nice in 2023 and 2024. Employers could pay up to 3,000 euros tax and contribution free to employees, which is not the case any longer in 2025. But there's a lot of lobbying being done right now, especially with the government changing right now in Germany to find new ways of introducing this again, because this was, of course, for employees fantastic, and also for employers to really make, being employed there attractive if they get a tax-free bonus. I mean, that's very unheard of in Germany. Unfortunately, another change will be that there are going to be increased wage tax audits because the landscape is ever changing. There are new benefits in kind coming up. Expense reimbursements gets trickier. What is being reimbursed to what thresholds? So we can really expect more and more audits from the tax officials, but also from social security institutions to audit employers and really see what are you doing. I mean, there are already audits in place every 4 years for social security, but especially when it comes to wage tax, they're going to get really in there and push employers to do their work correctly. Yeah. So finally, let's talk about best practices for multinational companies. So if you want to start a branch in Germany, what to think of? What can I tell them? I think the most important aspect, because Germany is so complex, I think on the global payroll complexity index, it has risen to second or third place at the moment. It's very important that you work with local providers, because Germany is a big country. German is the language that you need to speak in Germany. All of the documents have to be in German in Germany. So working with them is really, really necessary, in my opinion, to get all of the compliance done, to get language barriers out of the way, and really look into the legal nuances of your particular industry that you have to think about. The collective bargaining agreements, all of those different tax classes and social contribution groups. It's quite something. So really think about the local expertise that is there to get everything set up and not miss any kind of mandatory things that you should be doing, and then get fines afterwards. And also to get your company or your branch really, really set up in Germany, because you have to have a branch registered in Germany with the Chamber of Commerce and whatnot. Apart from that, as I said earlier, it's really important to ensure accurate gross net calculations. Mistakes in that, they can happen, but they can really damage the trust in the employees in Germany, because they really question it. I've never seen a country that really questions like, oh, I've seen 75 cents different to last month. Why is that? We get those questions. We
Yeah.
get those questions, not just in higher education, but in all kinds of industries. We're really interested in what's going on. So the amount of questions you actually receive from employees about payslips, I think, is really high compared to other countries, for example, in Switzerland or in the Netherlands. So there's a lot of interaction you have to do with your employees in Germany. And of course, stay current with all of the social contribution limits. Make sure you are always up to date with all of the legislation changes, and digitize your documentation. Unfortunately, German authorities still expect accurate documents and in paper form. So we are not completely digitized in Germany, and you have to have a working contract in paper somewhere stored. But of course, you can scan it, so you have access to it from everywhere, but you need to have them actually stored in Germany for 10 years. So make sure you get that set up. You have your registration done. You have everything, all of the records that you need for audits. You have them in place. And always check your collective bargaining applicability. Is there one in place? Do you overlook something? Do you have all of your wage types set up you need for this? I think that's very, very important.
Yeah. That was incredible. That was amazing. I think I've learned more in that 20 minutes than I learned at school. So that covers our core overview on German payroll. Lots to think about when it comes to the complexities in running a German payroll. For the next part of the session, let's go in with our case study. Today, we're looking at Quantum Grid Technologies, a company that recently expanded into Berlin with a team of 28. Could you walk us through how they navigated Germany's strict payroll reporting rules, income tax classes, and collective agreements?
Right.
Oh,
So let's look at the challenges that we're facing. So the first challenge they faced was actually incorrect data sync between the employee tax classes and the Alstom database that we have in Germany. So what about that? Usually what the employees need to do is they have everything registered with the local tax office, and then it's being uploaded to the database, and the employer only reads the database. But if you are not completely synced, if there is a problem with the synchronization with the database, you can't actually read what's in there, or you read incorrect information. So of course your employees can tell you, well, my tax class is 2, I have 2 children and should get certain deductions and what have you. But you need to verify it, because at the end of the day, if you do not verify it and you pay the tax according to what they tell you and it's incorrect, you as the employer are actually being fined, and not the employee is being fined for providing wrong information. So what you really have to do with this to make sure that, for example, also church tax, is it applicable or not? Because this is also an opt-in, opt-out situation for the individual employee. You have to make sure everything is synced correctly, that you run them not only on a monthly basis. We right now, with like more than 4,000 employees, we actually run them every night. Are there any changes? Should there be anything considered to make sure it runs smoothly? And if anything is going on, you can talk to your provider, your payroll software provider, or even the officials to make sure that this problem is being, you know, that you find a solution for that and you can actually calculate the correct taxes. Yeah, so what I can always tell you with that is make sure you have a foolproof onboarding. So you have all of the necessary information, you challenge it, and then you make sure that you have the interface running smoothly and everything is going on correctly. Another issue that they were facing was that they misapplied an actual collective bargaining agreement. So they had engineers going on there, and they are actually covered by a certain collective agreement in that industry, and they were not being paid correctly with that. So what do you have to do for that? You always have to make sure that you review who are your employees, what industry are you operating in, and is there already a collective bargaining agreement in place between the unions and the other employers? And is this something you need to follow and make sure it's in there? So certain, collective bargaining agreements, they also ask for certain wage types, and then you have to make sure that those wage types are also implemented in your software and that you can use them if need be. I mean, think about on-call duty, think about night shifts, think about some kind of exceptional payments for whatever they're doing, that you have to put them in there. And of course, make sure that they are reportable to all of the necessary institutions. So this is definitely a very important check to do firsthand. And also, if you're not sure, get some local providers, get some legal support on that to make sure it's correct, and that then also your actual contracts with the employee are correct and they're referring to the collective bargaining agreement that works in that industry. What's also very interesting is, as I said earlier, we have 88,000 different bargaining agreements. So depending on your industry, depending on the way your company is set up, it could be the case that you have different branches under different collective agreements in Germany. So it's very important that you make sure that you know your population you're doing payroll for, that you make sure that you're knowing, okay, who is who and what applies to whom in your payroll cycle. So I usually add identifiers to the employees with just, customized fields in my software to make sure I know what CO is applicable. So we can cluster them. We have the wage types ready for the certain kind of population. And of course, it makes reporting afterwards so much easier, especially when thinking about the official yearly certificates. In the UK, you have the P11Ds. In Germany, of course, you have something similar, and you have to make sure that the right amounts are in the correct fields on them so that the officials can actually read them. Another thing that happened here is that the mini job limit was breached. As I said earlier, we have this mini job level of 556 euros a month. Where you have the flat rate contributions on employer side. But what happens if you actually pay them more than the 556? Well, the good thing is you can actually do that. You can do that twice a year. Usually that's what you say. You can actually breach that limit, but only up until 1,116, so twice the 556 euros. You can breach that within a total calendar year. So think about an employee that starts in April. Well, of course, you only then have 9 months of those 1,116 euros you can actually breach without having to pay full contributions. Well, if you continuously breach it, well, then you have to pay the contributions. And as I said earlier, this again is the responsibility of the employer. So you cannot actually hold your employee accountable if you're not calculating the employee contributions to it. And then you as the employer have to pay the employee and the employer contributions at the end of the day. If there's an audit, they find it out. And then there you go. So have those in mind, know how often you can breach them. And the good thing is with those mini jobbers, usually in Germany, they are actually hourly waged. So you have to have some kind of time card, some kind of, attendance checking to know how many hours they worked. And then of course have your calculation already ready, how much that will be in gross pay at the end of the month. If you're doing that, you can already, with the time cards, put in some kind of secondary checks that tell you, okay, this is a warning system implemented that tells you you are breaching the 556, and then you can still decide, well, this time it has to happen, or it shouldn't happen at all. And then you can, put it into the next month or what have you. And of course, during your actual trial runs, you can have secondary checks to see, because they have to have a certain, social contribution group key. As I mentioned earlier, one of those 252, you can really filter on them and see, has anyone been breached, and then, reach out to the business and tell them like, hey, we actually cannot pay this. So you can breach it up until this amount. The amount is prorated. This is very important. Keep that in mind. And usually, depending on the software that you use, there's already some built-in checks about this that tell you like, hey, have this in mind. So make sure you do your checks, make sure you have a warning system in place, and make sure you have secondary checks, and then it shouldn't happen again. All right. And the last thing here that happened, which is quite interesting, is a relocation gone wrong. So they had an employee from abroad coming to Germany, and they couldn't file for tax for them, and they couldn't, pay the correct social security contributions because their social security number was missing. So what happened is they were excluded from the actual pay run. No salary was paid and no social contributions paid. We don't want that. So how can we actually prevent this from happening? What you always should do with international employees is take into account that it needs a lot of time and a lot of guidance for making them ready to be, paid in Germany. The employee has to apply for their work visa. They have to apply for a residence permit. So they need their official contract way before they actually start working. They have to find a house or housing in general where they can be registered with the local officials, because only if they're registered as living in Germany, they can actually get a tax ID. And without a tax ID, there are no tax classes, you cannot calculate tax, payroll doesn't run. And only if you have applied for the tax ID, you can then apply for for health insurance in Germany. And only if you have applied for health insurance, you can actually get a social security number, which again, you need for payroll in Germany. So without those two numbers, there is actually nothing going on. And, this is a big apparatus in Germany. So you cannot expect an employee, if they are starting on the 1st of April, that they come to Germany on the 1st of April and you can get everything set up so that they can be paid in April. This has to happen way in advance, and you have to make sure that you have enough time to get everything set up, whether you want to help the employee, whether you want to use agencies that actually help you do that and get everything up and running before the first day of working, and get everything under control. So yeah, take enough time for all of those steps. Make sure you have everything before they actually start working. Because I mean, all of those things in Germany as well. It's a means from the government to prevent moonlighting and undeclared work, which is very difficult, especially with non-Germans when they come to Germany for the first time. Once they're here, once they've done this once, they have this number for the rest of their time. So that works well. But if you really want to relocate them, take your time. It's very important for Germany.
That was amazing. And I think the highlight, like you just finished on, is take your time. If you're relocating a team to Germany, it's so complex, and there's a lot of hoops you need to jump through, so you don't want to try and rush it at all. So that was brilliant. That was brilliant, Julian. Certainly a lot to consider. But if the payroll team at Quantum Grid follow your guidelines, they'll be sure to pass the payroll audit.
Well, I really hope so. Yeah.
So do I. So do I. Let's move on to some questions. I don't think there's a global payroll in the world that doesn't have a few questions on Germany. So first question I've got is, do employers need to contribute to private health insurance premiums if their employee opts out of statutory coverage?
Yes, that's a great question. This is always a conundrum for Germans as well. So the easy answer is yes, they have to. But the big difference here is that the contributions for statutory health insurance, they go up until your income is 73,800 euros a year. So this is the magic limit this year. And again, this changes every year. So this is the magic limit here. Under this, you actually cannot apply for private health insurance in Germany. There are a few exceptions, of course, but you know, your run-of-the-mill employee, they actually can't do it. So once your income is over this threshold, you can apply for this. The big difference is if you're under it, you have statutory health insurance, the contributions are actually deducted from your gross. If you're above this threshold, those contributions are actually, you know, allowances that come on net, which is a huge difference also on the pay slip, which usually confuses people in Germany. So what does the employee need to do? If they opt out of statutory health insurance, they get a private health insurance, they can decide what kind of package they want. And they need certain forms, of course, it's still Germany, from this private health insurance that actually says they are insured with this insurance because we as the employer, we have to make sure all of our employees are insured. There cannot be an employee who isn't insured. They have to provide this form, and this form has to have, of course, certain amounts on them. And there is a certain standard for it that we then, as the employer, can use to actually pay the contributions on the employer side, then as a net allowance. And of course, again, it's Germany. Those allowances and contributions we, as the employer, pay. They're also limited to, for health insurance, it's 471 euros a month. So even if you have a more expensive package that you choose for as the individual, the employer is only asked to pay up until 471 euros and 88 for the long-term care insurance. Yeah.
Awesome. Next question. How do you handle expatriates in Germany from a payroll perspective?
Yes, that's the biggie. It just, as shown in the case study, the biggest aspect to handle them well is preparation. I think that's really, really the most important aspect. You have to get all of the necessary legal aspects in order and set up with the new employee before they can actually start working. And this is not only a payroll question, this is also a labor law question. And this is one of the greatest examples to see how all of those different laws, come together in payroll. Because if they cannot work officially, you cannot payroll them. You have to get everything set up for them. They have to get everything set up. They need all of the documentation, the IDs you need as the payroller to get them set up in payroll. A bank account. You need a bank account, or at least a European one where SEPA works to be paid in Germany is also very important. It really takes time for this. You need documentation resilience when facing this kind of bureaucratic world that Germany is sometimes. But I can tell you, once you have this in order and you're good to go, and you can really call yourself a master on paperwork, because there's a lot going on. You can do it yourself. You can do it with as the employer, or there are so many agencies actually who make their work out of that, because there is so much to consider, so much to do. And I can tell you, at least take 3 months of preparation to get it starting before the first actual working day in Germany, because otherwise you're risking fines and very unhappy employee, and we don't want that.
Yeah, that was going to be my follow-up question. How long should you usually leave to do it? I was thinking a lot shorter. 3 months it's a long period of time.
The problematic aspect is you first have to get one thing started before you can applying for the next one. So this is like this huge chain of things you have to do. It's not, okay, I'm here now, I'm applying for this, that, and that, and then I'm waiting until I'm getting everything. No, you first have to do this, then you get something. With that, you have to go to the next government official, apply for the next thing, wait for the response. And, that takes time. It really takes time.
Yeah.
And depending on where you live, I mean, this is also, Germany is very famous for that. Depending on where you live, if you want to get an appointment with the government, with your local officers, it can take up to 2 months to actually get an appointment.
Wow.
So that's quite something.
Brilliant. So next question, are German payslips required to follow a specific format?
Well, if what I've said so far hasn't given you any inclination, let me tell you, yes,
Yeah.
yes. How could it be any other way? So actually, when you look at a German payslip, there's a plethora of information that must be on the payslip. Think about the individual information of the employee. Think the tax class. Think the social security group keys that we have, the social security number. All of this information you request from your employee before they start actually has to come on the payslip. And in an ideal world, the employee actually checks this to be correct. In an ideal world. So you put that on the payslip. You have to have your monthly breakdown of the gross to net, of how the actual net is being calculated and what is being transferred to the employee. But also you have to put in the year-to-date breakdown as well. So what were the amounts on a year-to-date basis in a different column on it. So there is a certain standard to it, what needs to be there. But you know, the good thing is all licensed payroll softwares in Germany, they know how to do that. They only differ in style. So you can, of course, decide whether you want to put it to the left, to the right, to the middle. If you want to put a logo on there, the font you want to use, you can, make it prettier. But at the end of the day, it's still the same kind of information. It's a lot of information on there. And in my time with German payroll, it has always been one of the major questions. Couldn't someone from the payroll department explain a payslip for us? And we do that, with newcomers, and again with people who have been working in Germany for a very long time, and they always come back. I never understood my payslip. I trust you. Said, well, that's a good thing. Keep trusting in us.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
mean, next question is kind of going back to expatriates and that sort of thing. What's the biggest mistake foreign employees make in Germany?
Yeah, I think this ties into what I've already said before. I think the biggest mistake employers can make is to underestimate the actual effort it needs to set everything up in Germany. And not
Mhm.
just only meaning but having expat employees coming to Germany, but if you're moving to Germany, opening a branch. I mean, it's not just payroll, but getting the actual branch, the company set up in Germany with all of the compliance requirements, to have the legal entity there, to have an actual post address there, to have everything there for the tax authorities, the National Employment Agency. You need numbers, you need identification, you need accident insurance for employees who come to the office, or even if they're in a home office, you need accident insurance. Getting all of those things set up
Mm.
is a prey to actually then start payrolling. And I think people really underestimate this. Even Germans underestimate this. I've been part of, mergers and acquisitions where there's, an already existing legal entity, but also if you start a new legal entity under your umbrella company and what have you, it takes a lot of time. And, I usually have people from the business in Germany coming to me like, oh, we want to start a new legal entity next month. And like, well, good luck. That's not gonna work. So this could be a huge thing for people underestimating all of the timely efforts you have to put in, because if you don't do it correctly, you risk non-compliance, and we all know what that means: fines, backdated tax claims, and what have you. And this is, of course, something you don't want as an employer. You don't want to talk to your CEO about what are those payments? Why do we have to pay so many fines? So I would always say and advise people to invest in a local agency to support them, especially since everything will be in German language. You need to speak German to do all of those things. A lot of Germans still refuse to speak English, and they don't have to because it's not legally required. It's legally required to do all of those forms in German. So get someone who speaks German, get someone who has experience with that, and set it up for you. Invest in this and not just try to get out of that. So as I said earlier, not only with the employees coming to Germany, but also setting up a legal entity, setting up a payroll, getting the wage times in there that you need, with all of the collective bargaining agreement, at least 3 months, you need the time to get everything up and running before you can have your first pay run.
Yeah, a lot of preparation. What what are the hidden costs you should be aware of?
Yeah, I think this is also something where people underestimate Germany. So payroll costs are actually much higher than just gross salary. As I said earlier, social contributions, they are shared equally between employer and employee. And we usually take about 21% of the gross salary you have to add to the actual salary in terms of employer costs. But apart from that, this is just, the salary part. You have also mandatory insurances you have to, get as an employer. Think about collective accident insurances, where we have the lovely German Berufsgenossenschaft, where you have to apply for this and make sure that everything went smoothly. But there are also, the collective bargaining agreements. Is there something in there that needs to come on top to the gross salary? Are there certain salary bands that have to be negotiated and those kinds of things? Does there have to be, a legal progression in salary? Sometimes they think, well, we negotiated the salary, so that's fixed. Well, maybe after a year, 2 years, 3 years, you have to go up, and those are just some of those hidden costs. But there's also more, thinking about the general German social security apparatus, not only on an employee side, but think about artist social fund. We have something in artist social fund in Germany. If you hire someone to do your web design, that's actually declared artistic work in Germany, and then you have to pay an extra payment to the artist social fund so that the artist doing the web design for you is actually insured themselves. So it's not just paying someone to do your web design, but there's also a huge social apparatus behind this. And also think about employees with disability. There are certain legislations in place in Germany that you have to employ enough people with disabilities that are officially recognized by the German state. And if you don't do that, you actually have to pay disability tax. And this is so this can vary so differently from the industry, from what you need to do with your employees. So you have to calculate it. If you cannot hire people with disability, or you can't find people with disability that are recognized, you have to pay disability tax. And this is nothing you think about when you start, your branch in Germany, that this is all part of Germany as well. And then, of course, you have to pay, for setup, for audit costs that you have with the payroll provider to actually get the show running.
Okay, wow. I never that one about the artist social fund. I never heard of that sort of thing before. That's really interesting.
I think most people haven't heard about that, and that makes it
Yeah.
also difficult for people to really understand, what do I have to do? And you have to declare the actual amounts that you pay to those artists, and who is even an artist. I mean, there is, of course, a huge catalog of differentiation of what counts as artistic work.
Yeah.
Has it been done by a company? Has it been done by an individual who's working freelance? All of those different aspects you have to keep in mind at the end of the year to declare all of the artistic work that has been done, and then you get an invoice of how much that makes up for the artist social fund.
Wow. Okay, so final question. What are the employee expectations in Germany regarding payroll?
I think that when it comes to payroll in Germany, and I think I've mentioned this earlier, I think payroll needs to be punctual and transparent. And this is the biggest thing. The pay slip needs to be clear to everyone, and it isn't by default. If you look at the German pay slip, like numbers, what? And you have to invest in making sure that your employees understand what is on your payslip, because they will ask. So the correct net pay is really important for employees. It has to be transferred on the last banking day of the month. Otherwise, people will complain. And from experience, they even complain if it's not there on the second to last day, because they are expecting it, because they have bills to pay. So, I mean, I get it. But, this is kind of the expectations that employees have when it comes to payroll or the employer. They're not, they're not thanking the payroll department as so often. They hardly ever do. But there needs to be this kind of intrinsic relationship of trust between the payroll and the employee. Mistakes can happen. I mean, Germans can be very forgiving, but in my experience, they really want to know the why, the what, and the how. So if there is a difference and it's not transparent, it's not clear, I can tell you they will ask, and they will ask the payroll department, they will ask questions, they will raise tickets, or however you're structuring it. And from my experience, I can tell the less questions you get from employees, the better your payroll runs, and the more trust they have in what you're doing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's so true, is making the employee aware of how it's working, and if there is an issue, how it's come about, and
Yes.
you rebuild that sort of trust, doesn't it? Thank you so much for answering those questions. We're coming to the end now. Julian, thank you so much for joining us today. I've always been told that German payroll is one of the most structured and unforgiving systems in Europe, but you've broken it down and made things much easier to understand. So thank you for that. It's true, without the right process, partners, and awareness, is absolutely manageable. To everyone who joined us today, thank you so much for being part of Global PayFest 25 and the Germany session, of course. I'm confident that this session would have helped you gain clarity and adopt practical tools for managing payroll here in Germany. As with all the others, this session will be available on demand for replay or sharing, or just brushing up on your German knowledge as you take on new regions. Next up, we're heading to France, where we'll unpack another uniquely regulated payroll environment. Julian, thank you so much. Any final thoughts before we close?
Well, thank you. I think setting up payroll in Germany, it is a daunting undertaking. But if you've made it through, well, congratulations. You probably qualify to run a small government. It's complex, yes, but it's also precise. It's protective of the individual, and dare I say, beautiful in its own right. It's about navigating, a deeply structured, highly regulated system that reflects how seriously this country takes social responsibility. I think that's amazing. So thank you for joining me. I hope this gave you clarity and a little confidence. So find me on LinkedIn for questions, stories, and payroll war wounds. Bye-bye und auf Wiedersehen.
Thank you again, Julian. That's a wrap on our Germany session of Global PayFest 25. The 25 4 hours are flying by. Stay tuned for France. Thank you.